In this video, I'm going to explain the difference between genotype and phenotype. So we will finally explain how this information we have in our genes affect how we look like or how the organisms will look like. So first, remember that we have heterozygous. Let's start with homozygous alleles, which could either be both dominant or both recessive. And heterozygous alleles or pair of alleles, which is a combination of the dominant and recessive trait. Okay. Now, genotype and phenotype, how they differentiate from one another, actually, they are connected to one another. Okay. It's not uh, similar to dominant versus recessive or homozygous versus heterozygous. This genotype and phenotype are different representation. Okay? So genotype is the genetic makeup based on the pair of alleles. So whatever pair of alleles you have, it could be both dominant, both recessive, heterozygous. That's your genotype. And phenotype, it's the physical trait based on your genotype, whatever is being dictated by your genotype. All right? So we will now apply the law of dominance in here. The law of having a dominant allele and recessive allele. Okay, now we have different types of genotype. We could either have uh, homozygous dominant, which means both capital P. We call it homozygous dominant because it's homozygous, same, and they are both dominant. Or we could either have homozygous recessive, which is both smaller p's. All right. Okay. Again, it's homozygous because they are the same, and it's recessive because it has the recessive allele or the white color. All right. Or, sorry, it could either be heterozygous. So in heterozygous, you don't have to say it's dominant or recessive because it's a combination of dominant and recessive. So you just say heterozygous. Only in homozygous alleles, you say if it's dominant or recessive. It could either be homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive. But in heterozygous, it's just heterozygous. Okay? There's no type of heterozygous, only one. All right? Because remember, we don't have this. Okay? This is wrong. I couldn't emphasize it more. All right? There is nothing like that. All right. Now, this genotype is your genetic information, but it dictates something or a version of phenotype. Okay? So in here, we will already apply the dominance. So again, it's a physical trait. It's a trait that you see. This genotype, this gene right here, you will not be able to see it because we will not be able to see the DNA inside the cell. It's very, very tiny. And you will not see letters like this, only chemicals of the DNA or the molecules of the DNA. But what we can see is the phenotype or the physical trait. All right. Now, for this version of genotype, homozygous dominant, it's allele or pair of allele having both dominant allele, which is purple, automatically the phenotype would be purple. Sorry. Okay? So if both alleles in this locus are dominant allele for purple, then the color of the flower will be purple. But if the allele present or the genotype is homozygous recessive, the allele present is white, which is a recessive allele, then there is no way that the color of the flower would be purple. Automatically, it would be white, right? So if the allele present in this locus are both recessive allele, which is white, then the color of the flower will be white. Now, this is what probably would be difficult to digest, but you have to accept it because that is what the law dominant says. Okay? So just like any other law, if it's the law, then you have to follow it. All right? So if you have a genotype which is a heterozygous, a combination of purple allele, which is dominant, and a white allele, which is recessive, you might think combination of purple and white, that must be light white. I mean light purple or faded purple. But according to the experiment of Mendel, instead of having a light purple color, it's just purple. Same color as your homozygous dominant. Okay? So why did that happen? It's because when you pair up this allele, purple, with this allele, white, this trait is being hidden. Remember, it's recessive, so it's being hidden and dominated by this color. So when you see a genotype like this, what you will have in phenotype is whatever color represents by the homozygous dominant. All right? So basically, that's the law of dominance. All right? Some trait is being hidden when you have heterozygous. But the trait will appear if you have no other choice but to have the trait, the recessive trait. Okay, so in the next slide, what you're gonna do is give an example of the type of allele and the type of pairing of allele, and the type of pairing is already your genotype. You will give their corresponding phenotype.